You've entered void of rules, a realm where normal constraints cease to exist. But beware, traveller, there is one rule here. You've got to hit subscribe. Seriously, it's the only rule we have. We just reached 1,000 brave souls, and we're hunting for 9,000 more to complete our dark ritual. I mean, reach our next goal, so subscribe. Or don't. But remember, the void remembers those who defy the only rule. Now let's get into today's video. I'm standing in a musty equipment shed with Dr. Penelope Crankshaw, my new supervisor at Moonbeam Hollow Research Station. She's a rail-thin woman with nervous eyes who keeps glancing towards the tree line, like she expects something to emerge from between the ancient oaks and towering pines. The afternoon sun filters through the canopy, casting long shadows that seem to move independently of their sources, writhing and stretching across the forest floor in patterns that make my eyes water if I stare too long. The research station itself is a collection of prefabricated buildings connected by gravel paths and wooden walkways. Everything looks temporary, as if the whole operation could be packed up and moved at a moment's notice, which, according to the faded signs and rusted equipment scattered around the perimeter, has happened before. Several times. My predecessor, Beauregard Pickle, left behind a duffel bag of personal items and a crumpled napkin with 6 rules scrawled in pencil. The handwriting is shaky, desperate, like someone wrote them while their hands were trembling from cold or fear. Coffee stains and what might be blood dot the margins. Beau was a good worker, Dr. Crankshaw says, lighting her 4th cigarette in 10 minutes. The flame illuminates her weathered face for a moment before she shakes out the match, and I notice her fingers are yellowed, not just from nicotine but from something else, something that looks like old bruises under her fingernails. Found him sitting in his truck one morning, keys in the ignition, engine running. Been dead for hours, but he looked peaceful, like he'd just decided to take a little nap. She hands me the napkin, and I notice her fingers are stained with nicotine and something darker that might be soil. The paper feels warm, though that could be my imagination. At the top, in capital letters that seem to have been retraced multiple times, someone has written, "Follow these or you'll end up like the others." Beau wrote these down his first day, she continues, exhaling smoke through her nose. The wind carries the smoke towards the forest, where it seems to linger longer than it should, forming shapes that almost look like reaching hands before dissipating. Smart man, smarter than most. You'd be wise to do the same. I unfold the napkin carefully. The rules are written in different coloured inks, as if they were added over time, each one discovered through necessity rather than foresight. Some are written in neat block letters, others in frantic cursive that becomes harder to read as it progresses down the page. Rule 1. Never respond to knocking on your cabin door between midnight and 5 a.m. Dr. Crankshaw notices me reading and nods grimly. Doesn't matter how urgent it sounds, how much they claim to need help. Could be a child crying, could be someone screaming about an emergency. You stay inside and wait for dawn. Beau learned that one the hard way during his first week. Spent 3 hours listening to what sounded like a woman begging for help with her injured husband. Come morning, he found scratches on his door that went clean through the wood. Whatever was out there had claws like railroad spikes. She takes another long drag from her cigarette, and I notice her hands are shaking slightly. The thing is, he recognized the voice. It belonged to his ex-wife, Linda. Problem was, Linda died in a car accident 2 years before Beau ever set foot in these mountains. Rule 2. If you find carved symbols on trees, photograph them, but don't touch them. There'll be fresh cuts, she explains, stubbing out a cigarette and immediately lighting another. Deep gouges that weep sap like blood. The symbols, they're not from any language anyone's been able to identify. We've sent photographs to universities, to archaeological departments, even to some government agencies that prefer not to be named. Nothing. It's like they're from somewhere else entirely. She pauses, staring off into the forest. Document the location, take your pictures, then get as far away as possible. We've got people who handle symbol removal. Don't ask me who they are or how they do it. Some questions are better left unanswered. What I will tell you is that they work fast, and they work at night, and they never leave any trace that the symbols were ever there. Rule 3. Never follow the sound of crying babies in the forest. Her voice drops to almost a whisper. You'll hear it sometimes, especially on foggy nights. Sounds exactly like an infant in distress. Every instinct will tell you to help, but babies don't survive alone in these mountains. Whatever's making that sound isn't human, and it's very good at mimicking things that tug at your heartstrings. She flicks ash onto the ground where it seems to sink into the soil, faster than it should. The previous researcher before Bo, a woman named Dr. Patricia Wyndham, she followed the crying once, found her 3 days later, 20 miles from where she should have been, sitting in a circle of perfectly arranged stones. She was holding something in her arms, rocking it like a baby. When they got close enough to see what it was, Dr. Crankshaw shudders. It was a bundle of sticks and moss wrapped in her own jacket. She'd been caring for it like it was alive. Took months of therapy before she could even remember her own name. Rule 4. If your flashlight beam reveals footprints that disappear mid-stride, turn around immediately. Tracks that just stop, she says, grinding her cigarette butt under her heel, with more force than necessary, like whatever made them learn to fly or step between spaces. Don't try to figure out where they went. Just leave. Bo found a trail like that his second week. Followed it for half a mile before it vanished. Said the silence that followed was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. She lights another cigarette. Her 5th since we started talking. The tracks are always human, by the way. Bare feet usually, but sometimes boots. Work boots, hiking boots, even dress shoes once. Always the right size for an adult. Always pressed deep into the earth like whoever made them was carrying something heavy. Or maybe like gravity worked differently for them. Rule 5. Never sleep in any structure you find abandoned in the woods. Cabins, lean-tos, hunting blinds. Doesn't matter how tired you are or how bad the weather gets. Those places are abandoned for reasons that have nothing to do with age or decay. The mountain has a way of preserving things that should have rotted away decades ago. You'll know them when you see them. They look too intact, too inviting. Her cigarette trembles between her fingers. There's one in particular you need to avoid, about 2 miles northeast of your cabin, sitting in a clearing that doesn't appear on any of our maps. Grey wood, intact windows. Looks like someone just stepped out for a moment. People who spend the night there, they don't come back the same, if they come back at all. Rule 6. If you meet Jebediah Crumpleton on the mountain paths, answer his riddles correctly. Dr. Crankshaw actually shudders when she reads this last rule. Old man, maybe 70, always wearing a red flannel shirt and carrying a walking stick carved with faces. He'll block your path and ask you 3 riddles. Get them wrong and you'll wander these mountains until you die of thirst, always thinking you're just about to find your way out. She drops her cigarette and lights another one immediately. Bo told me about him during his last week. Said the old man's eyes were older than the mountains themselves. Said the faces on his walking stick moved when you weren't looking directly at them, like they were trying to warn you about something. She folds up the napkin and hands it back to me. Your job is simple. Monitor air quality sensors and wildlife cameras across 8,000 acres of remote Appalachian wilderness. Check the equipment, download the data, file your reports. Keep to the marked trails during daylight hours. Stay in your cabin after dark. Follow those 6 rules like your life depends on it, because it does. The walk to my assigned cabin takes about 20 minutes along a winding dirt path that seems to curve around invisible obstacles. Dr. Crankshaw leads the way, pointing out landmarks and explaining the layout of the monitoring stations. Every few minutes she stops to listen to the forest, her head cocked like she's waiting for something specific. The sensors are spread out in a rough grid pattern, she explains as we walk. 12 stations total, each one about a half-mile from the next. Your job is to visit each station every 3 days, download the data, and perform basic maintenance. Simple work, really. The hard part is everything else. She stops suddenly and grabs my arm. Do you hear that? I listen carefully, but all I can make out are the normal sounds of a forest in late afternoon. Birds calling to each other, leaves rustling in the breeze, the distant sound of running water. What am I supposed to be hearing? Nothing, she says, releasing my arm. That's the point. When the forest goes completely quiet, that's when you need to be worried. That's when you know something else is out there. Something that makes every living thing hold its breath and hope it passes by. The cabin she assigns me sits in a small clearing about 2 miles from the main research station. It's a solid log structure built in the 1960s, with thick walls and sturdy locks on both the front and back doors. The windows are small and set high, giving me a view of the surrounding forest without making me feel exposed. Inside, the cabin is spartanly furnished but comfortable. A single bedroom with a narrow bed, a small kitchen with a propane stove and refrigerator, a living area with a wood-burning fireplace and a desk for my reports. The previous occupant left behind a few personal touches, books on forestry and wildlife management, a chess set with half the pieces missing, and a journal filled with daily observations that become increasingly paranoid as the entries progress. Dr. Crankshaw helps me carry in my supplies, constantly glancing toward the windows as if expecting to see something watching us from the tree line. When everything is unloaded, she stands in the doorway for a moment, looking like she wants to say something else. Dr. Crankshaw, is there anything else I should know? She pulls out another cigarette but doesn't light it, just rolls it between her fingers. The mountain has been here for millions of years. We've been studying it for less than 20. Don't make the mistake of thinking you understand it or that your education and training give you any advantage here. The mountain doesn't care about your degrees or your experience. It only cares whether you follow the rules. She lights the cigarette and takes a deep drag. One more thing. If you start having dreams about the forest, write them down. Every detail you can remember. Sometimes the dreams are more real than the waking hours, and sometimes they're warnings. After she leaves, I spend the rest of the afternoon familiarizing myself with the cabin and reviewing my equipment. The monitoring devices are standard scientific instruments: air quality sensors, weather stations, motion activated cameras for wildlife observation. Nothing exotic or unusual, which somehow makes the whole situation more unsettling. If the work is so routine, why the elaborate warnings and mysterious rules? My first few days pass peacefully enough. The work is exactly as Dr. Crankshaw described: hiking to remote monitoring stations, checking equipment, and documenting wildlife activity. The Appalachian wilderness is breathtaking during daylight hours. Ancient trees tower overhead, their trunks so massive that 3 people holding hands couldn't circle them. Streams carve silver paths through moss-covered rocks, and wildflowers bloom in hidden meadows that probably haven't seen human footprints in decades. The wildlife is abundant and varied. I document deer, black bears, wild turkeys, and dozens of bird species. My cameras capture foxes, raccoons, opossums, and even a few coyotes. Everything appears normal, healthy, and completely unremarkable. But as evening approaches each day, the forest changes. The cheerful bird songs fade to silence. The rustling of small animals in the underbrush stops completely. Even the wind seems to hold its breath, waiting for something. The transition is so abrupt and complete that I start timing it. Every day, within minutes of sunset, the forest becomes a tomb. The first test comes Tuesday night. I'm reading a paperback novel by lamplight, a mystery about a detective investigating disappearances in a small town, when someone pounds frantically on my cabin door. The sound is so sudden and violent that I drop my book, heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. "Please," a woman's voice sobbing with desperation. "My little girl fell down the mine shaft. I need help getting her out." The voice is raw with panic, the kind of terror that only comes from a parent facing their worst nightmare. Every instinct screams at me to help, to grab my flashlight and first aid kit and rush outside. This is exactly the kind of emergency that requires immediate action, the kind of situation where hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. But I remember rule 1, and I force myself to stay seated at my kitchen table, hands pressed flat against the wood to stop them from shaking. "Please, you have to help me," the voice continues, now accompanied by scratching sounds against the door. "She's hurt so bad, and I can't reach her. I saw your light. I know you're in there." The woman describes her daughter's injuries in heartbreaking detail, broken bones, bleeding, crying for her mother from the bottom of a dark shaft. She gives the child a name, Emma, and an age, 7 years old. She describes Emma's favourite doll, her fear of the dark, her trust that someone will come to help her. I press my hands over my ears, but the woman's pleas penetrate anyway. The scratching at the door grows more frantic, and I swear I can hear the wood beginning to splinter. For nearly an hour, she alternates between begging and screaming, sometimes breaking into sobs so intense that I find myself standing up, reaching for the door handle before catching myself and sitting back down. The worst part is how real it sounds. This isn't the flat, artificial quality of a recording, or the stilted delivery of someone reading a script. This is genuine human anguish, the kind of raw emotion that can't be faked or manufactured. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stops. Complete silence returns to the forest, so absolute that I wonder if I imagined the entire episode. But when morning comes and I finally work up the courage to check my door, I find deep gouges in the wood that definitely weren't there the day before. The scratches go clean through the wood in some places, leaving splinters scattered on my porch. More disturbing are the footprints in the soft earth around my cabin. Bare feet, small enough to belong to a child, circling the building again and again. But the prints are pressed too deep into the soil, as if whoever made them weighed far more than their size would suggest. Wednesday morning brings my first encounter with the carved symbols. I'm checking Sensor Station 3, about a quarter mile from the main trail, when I notice something wrong with an old oak tree. Fresh cuts mark its trunk, symbols that hurt to look at directly. They're not letters from any alphabet I recognize, but angular marks that seem to shift and writhe when I'm not focusing on them completely. The symbols appear to have been carved recently, within the last day or two. The cuts are deep, going through the bark and into the white wood beneath. But instead of the clean, pale wood you'd expect to see in fresh cuts, these gouges are filled with something dark and viscous that might be sap, but smells like copper and decay. My hands shake as I photograph them with my digital camera. Each flash seems to make the symbols more pronounced, as if the light is feeding them somehow. The tree itself appears healthy otherwise, but the bark around the carvings has turned black in perfect circles, and thick, dark liquid oozes from the cuts like infected wounds. As I take the pictures, I become aware of a low humming sound, almost below the threshold of hearing. It seems to be coming from the tree itself, vibrating through my bones and making my teeth ache. The longer I stand there, the louder it becomes until I'm worried it might be audible from miles away. I take my pictures quickly and hike back to base at double speed, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The feeling of being watched doesn't fade until I'm back at my cabin, with all the doors locked. Even then, I spend the afternoon periodically checking the windows, convinced I'm seeing movement in the forest that has nothing to do with wind or wildlife. That night, I dream about the symbols. In the dream, I understand what they mean, and the knowledge fills me with a terror so complete that I wake up screaming. But when consciousness returns, the meaning slips away, like water through my fingers, leaving only the memory of absolute dread. Thursday passes uneventfully, but Friday brings the crying baby. I'm checking cameras near Devil's Backbone Ridge when I hear it echoing through the morning mist. The sound is unmistakably that of an infant in distress, the kind of helpless wailing that triggers an immediate response in anyone with functioning empathy. The crying seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the trees and rocks until I can't pinpoint its source. My first instinct is to drop everything and search for the source of the sound. This could be a real emergency, a genuine crisis requiring immediate intervention. Babies don't survive long in wilderness conditions, especially not in the increasingly cold October weather, but I remember Rule 3, and I force myself to walk in the opposite direction. The crying follows me for nearly a mile, sometimes seeming to come from just ahead of me on the trail, sometimes from the thick underbrush, to my left or right. Occasionally it seems to be coming from above, as if the source is moving through the forest canopy. The sound evolves as I walk. What begins as the simple crying of a distressed infant becomes more complex, more nuanced. I hear what sounds like a child trying to form words, calling mama and help with increasing desperation. The voice ages as I listen, progressing from infant to toddler to young child. By the time I reach my cabin, the sound has evolved into something that doesn't quite sound like a human baby anymore. There's something else underneath the crying, a deeper tone that vibrates in my chest and makes my skin crawl. It reminds me of the humming I heard near the carved symbols, but lower, more organic. The crying doesn't stop until sunrise, and when I finally venture outside to check my surroundings, I find small handprints pressed into the mud around my windows. Child-sized, but with fingers that are too long and positioned in ways that human hands don't naturally bend. The second week passes in a haze of growing unease. The wildlife cameras capture increasingly strange footage during my daily downloads. Daytime recordings show normal forest activity, deer grazing in meadows, black bears foraging for berries, the occasional coyote trotting through frame. But the nighttime recordings are different. Hours of seemingly empty forest, but the audio tracks are full of whispers, footsteps, and that persistent baby crying. I fast forward through the footage, but something about those dark frames makes my scalp prickle. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement at the very edge of the camera's range, shadows that move against the direction of the wind. In one particularly disturbing clip, I watch what appears to be a conversation taking place just outside the camera's field of view. Two voices, one high and childlike, the other deep and resonant, speaking in a language I don't recognize. The conversation lasts for over an hour, occasionally punctuated by laughter that makes my skin crawl. I start keeping detailed logs of everything I observe, no matter how minor or seemingly insignificant. The time the wind changes direction, the moment when bird songs stop, the precise locations where I find unusual animal tracks. Patterns begin to emerge, but they're patterns that don't make sense according to any scientific framework I understand. The wildlife behavior becomes increasingly erratic. Deer appear in my photographs, standing in perfectly straight lines, all facing the same direction. Flocks of birds wheel through the sky in formations that look almost like symbols, the same angular shapes I found carved into the oak tree. Even insects seem to be following some kind of unnatural organization, clustering in patterns that remind me of circuits or maps. Thursday night brings my first encounter with the impossible footprints. I'm returning from a late equipment check when my flashlight beam reveals a clear trail of bare human feet in the muddy path. Size 11, deep impressions that suggest someone walking with deliberate purpose through the forest. The prints are perfectly preserved in the soft earth, showing the ridge patterns of toes and the arch of each foot. They're definitely human, but there's something unsettling about their spacing and depth. The person who made them was either very heavy or walking with an unnatural gait, taking steps that are too long and spaced too far apart. Curiosity overrides caution, and I follow the trail. The footprints lead off the main path and into the thick underbrush, weaving between trees and over fallen logs with impossible precision. Whoever made these tracks was moving through the forest in complete darkness without any apparent difficulty, never missing a step or stumbling over obstacles. I follow them for about 50 yards before they simply end. Not fade, not turn toward any surface someone could climb. The final footprint is as clear and deep as the first, pressed into a patch of soft moss beside a stream, but beyond it, nothing, as if their maker stepped out of existence mid-stride. I stand there for several minutes, sweeping my flashlight beam across the surrounding area, looking for any explanation. A rock outcropping they could have jumped to, a low branch they might have grabbed, a fallen log they could have used as a bridge, anything that would make sense of what I'm seeing. But there's nothing. The stream is too wide to jump across, the nearest tree is 20 feet away, and the muddy banks on both sides show no signs of disturbance. The trail just stops in the middle of nowhere, and the silence that surrounds me feels heavy with watching eyes. I turn around and run back to my cabin, but I swear I can feel something following me from the canopy above. The branches seem to rustle with movement that has nothing to do with wind, and twice I spin around convinced I'll see something dropping down behind me. My flashlight beam reveals nothing but empty forest, but the feeling of being pursued doesn't fade until I'm safely inside with every lock engaged. That night, I dream about walking through the forest on someone else's feet. In the dream, I'm moving with impossible grace and speed, stepping between trees and over obstacles without conscious thought. The forest is alive around me, every plant and animal part of a vast network of consciousness that I'm somehow connected to. When I wake up, my feet are dirty and there are leaves in my hair. Saturday brings my first meeting with Jebediah Crumpleton. I'm hiking the main trail towards the northern monitoring stations when I find him sitting on a fallen log directly in the middle of the path. He's exactly as Dr. Crankshaw described, ancient beyond measure, wearing a red flannel shirt that's somehow both faded and vibrant. His walking stick is carved with dozens of faces, and I swear they turn to follow my movement as I approach. "Young fellow," he says in a voice like grinding stone, "you want to pass, you answer my questions 3. His eyes are chips of flint, set deep in a face that looks like weathered leather. The walking stick taps against the log with each word, and the carved faces seem to mouth along with his speech. Up close I can see that the faces are incredibly detailed, each one unique, each one expressing a different emotion. Fear, anger, sorrow, madness. They're beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "I know who you are," I say, remembering Dr. Crankshaw's warnings. "You're Jebediah Crumpleton." He grins, revealing what look like carved bone where his teeth should be. "Smart boy. Means you know the rules. But knowing and following are different things entirely. You ready for my questions?" I nod, though every instinct is telling me to turn around and find another path. There's something about his presence that makes the air feel thick and heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. "First riddle," he continues without waiting for my response. "What walks on legs of shadow and dreams of yesterday's sun. My mind races. This isn't just wordplay. Something in his tone suggests that wrong answers carry serious consequences. I think about shadows, about dreams, about the strange things I've encountered in these mountains. The faces on his walking stick seem to be watching me expectantly, some nodding encouragement, others shaking their heads in warning. "Memory," I say, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Jebediah nods approvingly, and the carved faces on his stick seem to smile. "Good, good. Smart boy indeed. Second riddle, and this one's trickier. What eats time but never grows full?" This one comes easier, though I'm not sure why. Regret. "Very good," he says, leaning forward on his walking stick. The faces carved into the wood are definitely moving now, their expressions shifting and changing as they watch me. Smarter than poor Beauregard, anyway. He got stuck on the second question, spent near an hour trying to work it out. Last question, boy. And this one's the important one. What sleeps beneath the mountain and wakes when rules are broken? This riddle sends ice water through my veins. I think about the research station, about the strange rules, about all the warnings Dr. Crankshaw gave me. The carved faces on Jebediah's stick have gone completely still, as if they're holding their breath waiting for my answer. Somehow I know the answer with bone-deep certainty, though I have no idea where the knowledge comes from. "Hunger," I whisper. Jebediah grins wider, and for a moment his carved bone teeth look less like decorative replacements and more like genuine fangs. Very good indeed. Pass on, boy, but remember this. Some hungers grow stronger when fed. Every rule broken is a meal, and it's been a very long time since the mountain was truly satisfied. He stands and steps aside, moving with fluid grace that seems impossible for someone his apparent age. As I pass him, he reaches out and touches my shoulder with one gnarled finger. "The mountain likes you, boy. Likes your smell, your taste, your particular flavor of fear. That's why it's been so gentle so far. But gentleness is just another kind of hunting strategy. Remember that when the real tests begin." His words follow me long after I've passed, echoing in my head with the persistence of a half-remembered song. The idea that something vast and patient sleeps beneath these mountains, sustained by human transgression, makes every step feel like walking on thin ice over a bottomless lake. The rest of the day passes normally, but that night I have the most vivid dream yet. I'm standing in a vast underground cavern, so large that my flashlight beam can't reach the walls or ceiling. The air is thick with the smell of earth and decay, and somewhere in the darkness, something enormous is breathing. Each exhalation moves the air around me like wind, and each inhalation creates a suction that pulls at my clothes and hair. In the dream, I understand that this thing has been sleeping for thousands of years, waiting for enough accumulated violations to justify waking up completely. Every broken rule, every transgression, every moment of human weakness feeds it and brings it closer to consciousness, and when it finally wakes up fully, the surface world will become just another part of its domain. I wake up with dirt under my fingernails and the taste of copper in my mouth. The third week brings dangerous curiosity and the beginning of my downfall. Confidence, I'm learning, is the enemy of survival in places like this. 2 weeks of following the rules religiously has given me a false sense of security. I start to think and understand how things work here, that I can navigate the dangers with careful observation and rational thinking. This is exactly the kind of arrogance that gets researchers killed. Monday night, when the knocking comes at 1:43 a.m, I find myself creeping toward the door to listen, instead of covering my ears and waiting for dawn. A man's voice this time, claiming to be a lost hiker with a broken leg. He describes his injuries in graphic detail, compound fracture, bone visible through torn skin, blood loss making him dizzy and weak. He begs for just a warm place to wait until dawn, promising he won't be any trouble. The voice is completely convincing, filled with the kind of pain and desperation that no actor could fake. But as I press my ear to the door, I hear something that stops my blood cold. The voice is coming from multiple directions at once, as if several people are standing around my cabin, all speaking in perfect unison. When I peer through the window, I see nothing but darkness, but the voice continues from at least 4 different locations simultaneously, maintaining perfect synchronization, even as it describes increasing levels of agony and hypothermia. Sometimes the voice breaks into sobs, and the crying comes from 6 or 7 different directions, creating a surround sound effect that makes my head spin. I back away from the door and spend the rest of the night huddled in my bedroom with a chair braced against the door. But I can still hear the voice, now joined by others. A woman claiming her car broke down, a child saying he's lost and scared, an elderly man describing a heart attack, all of them speaking in perfect unison, all of them positioned around my cabin like members of a twisted choir. The voices continue until dawn, and when I finally venture outside, I find footprints in every conceivable size and shape surrounding my cabin, adult and child, male and female, bare feet and shoes, all pressed into the earth with impossible uniformity. They form perfect concentric circles around the building, as if dozens of people spent the night marching in formation just outside my walls. Tuesday brings a discovery that changes everything. While reviewing camera footage from the Eastern Ridge, I noticed something in the background of what should be routine deer monitoring video. At the very edge of the frame, barely visible through the trees, stands what looks like an abandoned cabin. I rewind and play the footage several times, trying to get a better look. The structure appears in only 3 frames of video, visible for less than a second, but it's definitely there. Weathered grey wood, intact windows, sitting in what looks like a perfectly circular clearing, I grab my topographical maps and survey the area carefully. There's no structure marked at those coordinates. According to every official record, that section of forest has been uninhabited wilderness for over a century. But the cabin is definitely there in the footage, exactly where it shouldn't exist. Wednesday morning, I hike to the coordinates with my GPS and camera. The journey takes longer than expected because the terrain doesn't match my maps. Trails that should exist are overgrown, beyond recognition, while new paths appear to have been cut through the forest overnight. My GPS gives inconsistent readings, sometimes placing me miles from where I should be, other times spinning wildly through impossible coordinates. When I finally reach the location, the cabin is exactly as it appeared in the footage. It sits in a small clearing that doesn't show on any of my maps, surrounded by trees that grow in an almost perfect circle around the structure. The clearing itself is wrong, in ways that make my head hurt to contemplate. It's too round, too neat, and the grass grows in spirals rather than the random patterns you'd expect in nature. The building itself defies logic. The wood is weathered and grey, but shows no signs of rot or insect damage. The windows are intact, their glass somehow unbroken despite decades of apparent abandonment. Even the roof looks solid, covered with wooden shingles that should have fallen away years ago. Every instinct screams at me to leave, but I circle the structure anyway, taking photographs from every angle. Through one window, I glimpse an interior that looks recently used. A coffee mug sitting on a rough wooden table, ashes in the fireplace that might still be warm, a rocking chair that seems to be moving slightly as if someone just stood up from it. As I walk around the cabin, I notice details that become more disturbing the longer I observe them. The door is slightly ajar, revealing a slice of interior darkness that seems deeper than it should be. The windows reflect my image, but sometimes the reflection moves independently, turning to watch me even when I'm standing still. Most unsettling of all are the sounds coming from inside. Soft footsteps pacing across wooden floors. The creak of old furniture being moved. Occasional snippets of conversation in voices too low to understand. Sometimes I hear laughter, bright and cheerful, as if a family is enjoying dinner together, just out of sight. I almost go inside. My hand is actually on the door handle when I catch myself and remember Rule 5. The metal is warm under my palm, almost hot, and I swear I can feel a pulse running through it like a heartbeat. From inside the cabin comes the sound of a door opening, as if someone is moving deeper into the structure, perhaps climbing stairs to a second floor that doesn't appear to exist from the outside. "Come in," says a voice from inside, and my blood turns to ice because it's my own voice calling to me. "Come inside and see what we've been preparing for you." I back away from the door, but I can't shake the feeling that I've missed something crucial, something that would explain all the strange occurrences, all the rules, all the warnings. The cabin seems to watch me leave, and I swear I can see faces pressed against the windows, all of them smiling, all of them beckoning for me to return. That night I hear the baby crying again, but this time it seems to be coming from the direction of the abandoned cabin. The sound is different now, less distressed and more beckoning, as if whatever makes that sound has learned that I respond to calls for help, and it's adapting its approach accordingly. The crying is joined by other sounds, children playing, adults talking, the normal sounds of a family going about their evening routine. But underneath it all is something else, a low rumbling that might be machinery or might be something much more organic. I spend Thursday documenting everything I've observed, trying to find patterns or explanations that make sense within a rational framework. But the more I write, the more convinced I become that rational frameworks don't apply here. The rules aren't arbitrary superstitions. They're the result of hard experience, lessons learned through tragedy and loss. But understanding this intellectually and accepting it emotionally are different things. Part of me still believes that careful observation and scientific thinking can provide answers, that the strange phenomena have logical explanations that I simply haven't discovered yet. This is exactly the kind of thinking that gets researchers killed. Friday brings another encounter with the impossible footprints, but this time they're different. Instead of ending abruptly, they lead in a complete circle around my cabin, starting and ending at my front door. The implications are clear. Whatever made these tracks spent the night walking around my cabin, over and over, in an endless loop. The prints are deeper now, pressed into the earth with such force that they've cracked the underlying rock in several places. They're also larger than before, as if whatever made them is growing stronger or more substantial with each passing day. That evening, I decide to conduct an experiment. I set up my motion-activated camera to monitor my front door, then retire to my bedroom to wait. If something is indeed circling my cabin at night, I should be able to capture footage of it. The wait is agonizing. Every small sound makes me jump. Every creak of the cabin settling makes my heart race. At 11:30 p.m, the motion sensor activates with a soft beep. Then again at 11:35, and again at 11:40. The pattern continues throughout the night, regular as clockwork, the sensor triggering every 5 minutes until dawn. When I review the footage the next morning, my hands shake so badly I can barely operate the camera. The first few clips show nothing but empty forest, though the timestamp indicates the motion sensor was definitely triggered. But as the night progresses, the recordings begin to show something impossible. Footprints appear in the soft earth in front of my door, one at a time, as if an invisible person is walking in slow motion. I watch, transfixed, as each print forms in the mud, deep and clear, without any visible cause. The spacing is exactly right for someone walking at a measured pace, and the depth suggests considerable weight, but there's nothing there creating them. In the final clips, recorded just before dawn, something even more disturbing happens. The footprints begin to change, becoming larger and deeper with each step. By the last recording, they're no longer human-sized. They're massive, elongated, with what might be claw marks at the toe ends. I delete the footage immediately, my finger stabbing the delete button over and over until I'm certain every trace is gone. But I can't delete the memory of what I saw, and I can't explain away the physical evidence surrounding my cabin. The fourth week brings complete psychological breakdown. By Monday, the crying has become a constant background noise in my head. I know it's not real. I know it's some kind of auditory hallucination, brought on by stress and sleep deprivation, but I can't make it stop. It follows me during the day now, a persistent infant wail that echoes just at the edge of hearing. The sound has evolved beyond simple crying. Now I hear what sounds like a child learning to speak, babbling nonsense syllables that occasionally coalesce into recognizable words. Mama and Dada and help. And most disturbing of all, my own name spoken in a voice that sounds like it belongs to a toddler. Sleep becomes impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see that abandoned cabin with its too-warm door handle and its windows full of watching darkness. The baby's crying grows louder in my dreams, mixed with voices calling my name and the sound of footsteps that end in mid-stride. When I check the trail cameras, I discover footage that shouldn't exist. Videos of myself in locations I never visited, examining trees I never approached, standing in clearings I've never seen before. The timestamps match periods when I was definitely elsewhere, documented by my own daily logs and GPS tracks. In one particularly disturbing clip, I watch myself standing motionless in front of the abandoned cabin for over an hour, apparently having a conversation with someone just outside the camera's field of view. My lips are moving, my head nodding, as if listening to responses, but there's no audio track and no sign of whoever I'm supposedly talking to. The most frightening part is that I look completely normal in the footage, not distressed or coerced, but calm and engaged, as if I'm enjoying whatever conversation I'm having. When the hour ends, I watch myself smile and wave goodbye before walking directly toward the camera. For just a moment, as I pass out of frame, my face is clearly visible and my eyes are completely black. Tuesday brings a discovery that shatters my remaining rationality. While organizing my field notes, I find entries written in my own handwriting that I have no memory of creating. Pages and pages of observations about the forest, the wildlife, and the monitoring stations, all perfectly accurate and detailed, all written in my distinctive script. But these notes describe events that happened on days when I was sick and stayed in my cabin, or times when I was working on completely different tasks miles away. According to these phantom entries, I've been far more active than I remember, visiting locations I've never been to and documenting phenomena I've never observed. Most disturbing are the personal observations scattered throughout the false entries. Comments about how peaceful the forest becomes at night, how welcoming the abandoned cabin looks, how the crying babies sound more like singing if you listen carefully enough. These notes are written in my handwriting, but they express thoughts and opinions that are completely alien to my actual experience. At the bottom of the last phantom entry, someone has written, "The mountain is patient, but patience has limits. Soon it will be time to come home." Wednesday night, I decide to stay awake and observe what happens during the nocturnal hours. I position myself at my kitchen window with a thermos of coffee and my camera, determined to document whatever is causing the footprints and strange sounds. The forest goes quiet at exactly sunset, as it has every night since I arrived. But this time, I'm watching when the silence falls, and I see something that makes my rational mind simply shut down. Every animal in my field of view stops moving, at precisely the same moment. Birds freeze mid-flight and hang motionless in the air. A deer drinking from the stream becomes a statue, water droplets suspended between its mouth and the surface of the water. Even the leaves stop rustling, frozen in position, as if time itself has paused. The only thing that continues to move is the water in the stream, but even that flows more slowly, like thick syrup rather than the rushing brook I've grown accustomed to. Then, in this frozen tableau, I see them, figures moving between the trees, tall and impossibly thin, walking with fluid grace through the motionless forest. They're difficult to focus on directly, like trying to look at something in your peripheral vision. When I point my camera at them, they simply aren't there in the viewfinder, but I can see them clearly with my naked eyes. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all moving with purpose through the forest. Some carry bundles that might be supplies, or might be something else entirely. Others seem to be tending to the frozen animals, touching them gently, as if checking their condition or providing some kind of care. One of the figures approaches my cabin, moving directly toward my window. As it gets closer, I can see that it's wearing human clothes, though they hang strangely on its elongated frame. When it reaches the glass, it presses its face against the window, and I realize with horror that I'm looking at Beauregard Pickle. His face is wrong, stretched and distorted, but his eyes are unmistakably human and unmistakably terrified. His mouth moves as if he's trying to speak, but no sound penetrates the glass. Behind him, other figures gather, and I recognize them from photographs in the research station. Previous researchers, all transformed into these impossible beings, all trying to communicate something urgent. Beauregard raises one elongated hand and writes something on the fogged glass from his side. Letters appear backwards from my perspective, but I can read them clearly. Run while you still can. Then, as suddenly as it began, normal time resumes. The birds complete their interrupted flights, the deer continues drinking, and the leaves resume their rustling. The figures vanish, leaving no trace of their presence, except for the message on my window, which fades away as the glass clears. I don't sleep for the rest of the week. Thursday and Friday pass in a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. I jump at every sound, investigate every shadow, and document every minor anomaly with obsessive detail. My field notes become increasingly frantic and incoherent, filled with observations that contradict each other and theories that make no sense. I stop eating regularly, surviving on coffee and the occasional energy bar. I stop bathing or changing clothes. I stop following my assigned routes and instead spend hours sitting in my cabin, staring out the windows and waiting for something to happen. The baby crying never stops now. It's constant background noise, sometimes soft and distant, sometimes loud enough to drown out my own thoughts. I've started talking back to it, having conversations with the invisible infant as if it were really there. I know you're not real, I tell the empty air. I know you're just in my head. But sometimes, impossibly, the crying seems to respond to my voice, shifting in tone or volume, as if reacting to what I'm saying. Friday night brings the final test, though I don't recognize it as such until it's too late. The knocking comes earlier than usual, 11:47 p.m. A child's voice this time, high and sweet, and absolutely heartbreaking. "Mister, I'm lost and it's cold. My mummy told me to find the man in the cabin." The voice pierces through my exhaustion and paranoia like nothing before it. This isn't the inhuman mimicry I've grown accustomed to. This sounds like a genuine child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, confused and frightened, and desperately in need of help. I find myself walking toward the door before I fully realize what I'm doing. 2 weeks of sleep deprivation and constant stress have worn down my defenses, made me vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation. "Where's your mummy, sweetheart?" I call through the wood, my hand already reaching for the deadbolt. She's sleeping by the pretty cabin, the one with all the nice furniture. She said if I brought you back, we could all stay warm together. The abandoned cabin. My heart pounds as I realize this child, if it is a child, knows about my discovery. Maybe someone really is in trouble. Maybe a family got lost in the wilderness and took shelter in the only building they could find. Maybe the rules are just superstition, stories told to keep researchers from wandering too far from their assigned areas. My fingers touch the deadbolt and the metal burns like ice against my skin. Are you hurt, honey? Is your mummy hurt? She's just sleeping. She's been sleeping since we found the pretty cabin. But she'll wake up when you come with me. She promised. Something in those words sends alarm bells ringing in the back of my mind, but exhaustion and genuine concern override my caution. What if there really is a child out there? What if someone actually needs help and I'm letting them suffer because of some paranoid rules written on a napkin? The crying baby in my head suddenly stops, replaced by complete silence that feels heavier than sound. In that silence, I hear my own voice asking, what kind of person leaves a child outside in the cold because of superstitions? Please, mister, I'm really scared, and it's getting colder. I unlock the door. The moment my fingers turn the deadbolt, I understand that I've made an irreversible mistake. The silence outside doesn't break. Instead, it seems to flow into my cabin, like a physical presence. When I pull the door open, there's nothing on my porch but darkness and the smell of earth so rich and loamy, it makes me dizzy. But in that darkness, I hear Beauregard Pickle's voice, as clear as if he were standing right in front of me. Thanks for opening the door, friend. Been waiting out here for weeks. Behind him, other voices join in, a chorus of researchers who came before me, all thanking me for finally letting them in. Dr. Patricia Wyndham, who followed the crying baby. The researcher before her, whose name I never learned. Others going back years, maybe decades. I try to slam the door shut, but my arms won't obey. Something invisible holds the door open, while footsteps cross my threshold, tracking mud and something else across my floor. The footsteps are wrong, too heavy and spaced too far apart, like the impossible prints I found in the forest. Welcome to the family, says a voice that might be Beauregard, or might be something wearing his vocal cords. We've been so lonely out here, waiting for someone new to join us. The darkness outside my door begins to move, flowing into my cabin like thick liquid. As it touches me, I feel myself changing, stretching, becoming something that can exist in the spaces between normal reality. The transformation doesn't hurt. Instead, it feels like coming home after a long journey. The last thing I managed to write in my field notebook, found a week later by the next researcher, is this. The rules don't keep things out. They keep us from inviting them in. Once you break even one, you become the bait for whoever comes next. My body is discovered sitting peacefully in my truck, keys in the ignition, engine running. According to the coroner, I've been dead for hours, but I'm smiling. Clutched in my hand is a crumpled napkin with 6 rules written in shaky handwriting. At the bottom, in fresher ink, someone has added, "Follow these or you will end up like the others." But this isn't the end of my story. Death, I discover, is just another state of being in these mountains. Another way of existing in the spaces between what people consider real and unreal. I join the others who broke the rules, the researchers who came before me, and learned too late that some boundaries are meant to be respected. We move through the forest at night, tending to the sleeping things that maintain the balance between the surface world and what lies beneath. We visit the monitoring stations, ensuring the equipment continues to function, that the data continues to flow back to the research station. We maintain the illusion that everything is normal, that the work continues without interruption, and we wait for the next researcher to arrive, fresh and confident and certain that education and rational thinking can overcome any challenge. We whisper to them through the radio static, call their names from the darkness, leave them signs and warnings that they invariably ignore. Because the mountain is patient, but patience has limits. Each broken rule feeds the hunger that sleeps beneath the surface. Each transgression brings it closer to full awakening. The research station is just one of many feeding grounds scattered across the world, places where human curiosity and arrogance provide sustenance for things that should remain dormant. Dr. Crankshaw posts a new job listing the following week. The pay is exceptional for what seems like simple forestry work, and applications pour in from researchers eager for a chance to work in pristine Appalachian wilderness. The cycle continues, and something in the mountains grows a little stronger with each new invitation, each broken rule, each researcher who thinks they're smart enough to bend the guidelines just once. The new researcher arrives on a Tuesday, young and eager, and convinced that his advanced degrees will protect him from whatever claimed his predecessors. Dr. Crankshaw gives him the same speech she gave me, hands him the same crumpled napkin, with the same 6 rules written in the same desperate handwriting. We watch from the forest as he settles into the cabin, as he reviews his equipment and plans his first week of work. We listen as he reads the rules aloud, dismissing them as primitive superstitions, relics of a less enlightened time. On his 3rd night, when the knocking comes at his door, and the woman's voice begs for help with her injured daughter, we hold our breath and wait to see if he'll be stronger than we were, smarter than we were, better than we were. He sits at his kitchen table with his hands pressed over his ears, following the rules, surviving his first test, for now. But the mountain is patient, and hunger is a very powerful motivator. Sooner or later, every researcher breaks at least one rule. Some last weeks, some last months, but they all break eventually. The mountain knows exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which weaknesses to target. And when they finally open that door, when they finally touch those symbols, when they finally follow the crying into the forest, we're there to welcome them home. The mountain remembers everything we forget, and it never stops growing hungrier,